all of us are of an age, probably we might not be here 30 or 40 years from now, we might, if we're lucky. But if you had the chance to give up everything you currently have and give it up, your wealth, your fame, your accomplishments, and live through the next years of 30 years or so of innovation and start all over again, would you rather live through the next 30 years of innovation and see what the world's going to become, or would you like to stay where you are right now? You're happy to stay where you are? Would you like to give it all up and see the innovation in the next 30, 40 years?
I would rather, see it for the next 30 years.
All right, so you give up everything?
I'll give up, yes, because I'm sure great things are going to come.
All right, and Bill, you would like to?
Well, living longer is worth the better deal.
Okay. Same?
You know, David, I'd like to say something my two kids told me. I asked them what they'd like for their birthday. They said, we'd like a week without the internet.
Okay.
So in a way, I'd like to go back to those days when life was a little simpler.
Simpler, okay. Masa?
No, I all go for bet everything for the future.
Okay. So in your current life, let's assume you're going to have the current life. Let's talk about that. What has been the most important innovation that you have seen in, let's say, the last 10 years in the world in which you operate? What's been the most important change or innovation?
I think in the world that I operate in, especially in Africa, if you look at it, there is a massive GSM revolution. If you look at us in Nigeria, we had just about 500,000 lines in 2001. By 2017, we already have 139 million lines. So it's a massive and you can see what Reliance did in India, where, they were able to create 100 million lines in 170 days.
Wow. Bill? I'm sorry, Bill?
Well, I had an early career in the digital revolution, and that's still the fastest moving thing, and it's so horizontal in nature that it'll change banking, education, scientific research, sales and marketing. Today, a lot of my focus is more in the health area, and particularly miracle vaccines, getting a malaria, HIV, TB vaccine. Those are the things that I get to back amazing scientists. The digital revolution isn't slowing down, so we get the benefit of that. But in terms of equity, it's these health breakthroughs that I'm most excited about.
And you think people with health breakthroughs can live to be 90, 100, 110, 120?
Well, I'm not working on that problem. There's other Silicon Valley billionaires who want to live forever. My main focus is on the inequity that there's still so many. It's 100 times more likely for a child in Africa to die than a child in the United States. And these are all solvable diseases. We can get rid of that inequity. Extending life is very difficult because many of your body parts, including your brain, wear out. So I'm not in that field. I'm in the malaria, HIV, nutrition game.
All right. I don't think your brain's going to wear out, but okay. So, Indra?
David, I think every aspect of our life is changing because of what all these chaps are doing with technology. But I think the single biggest thing that I feel good about is the way technology is enabling gender inclusion. Because women are being enabled a lot more, and their voices are being heard. And I hope that progress is going into the future.
Well, let me ask about that. You have done two things in your career that were very innovative. One, you were an immigrant to the United States and became the CEO of one of the most important companies in the United States and the world, but you're also a woman. So what was it more difficult to become the woman CEO or the Indian immigrant CEO?
All of it.
Both, okay.
All of it. I think it was all of it. Because remember, I came into the workforce when there were hardly any women in senior executive positions. So now we have numbers, but 20, 30 years ago when I first started working, there weren't too many women. So I'd say that it was difficult being a woman and being in the workforce. I think being an Indian immigrant got me attention because I was often the only colored person in the room. And so that got me attention, but I had to work harder to prove that the color and the gender actually should not be counted against me. I could do a damn good job too.
Well, you have to be better qualified than
Way better,
white men,
yeah.
right?
A lot more.
Okay. So, Masa, what's the biggest innovation that you've seen in the last 10 years or so in your world?
Well, I think the not just 10 years, last 30 years, the innovation of the microprocessors, using the microprocessor as a base to create internet. That has changed the life of almost everybody on the earth. But going forward, I think it's accelerating even more on that.
Now, Mas, earlier in your career, you were a technology innovator, and at one point, I think in year 2000, you lost $70 billion of net worth. What did it feel like to lose $70 billion of net worth in 1 year?
Well, it was a crash. Everybody crashed. But somehow, at the bottom of the crash, I actually revived my spirits of the fighting, So actually, it was good.
Yeah,
By the way,
okay.
by the way, maybe Bill does not know. For 3 days, I became richer than Bill in that day.
Well,
But then after 12 months later, I became almost broke because 99% drop in our share price. 99% in 1 year.
so let me ask you one other question about your career for a moment. At one point, you made an investment of $20 million in a little company that wasn't heard of by many people called, I think it was Alibaba. Yes. It became worth about $90 billion and now worth about $130 billion. So how did you decide that Alibaba was a good investment? And do you have any more like that you could recommend to us?
Well, the Jack Ma, not because of the business model, not because of the technology, it's because of his charisma in leadership. And China had enormous opportunity of the upside. I said, this is the guy that can be the leader for this innovation.
Okay. Indra, you've tried to take a company that was known for selling sugar water in the view of some people and make it a more nutritionally safe and better company. Was that hard to beat the bureaucracy back at Pepsi when many people didn't want to do the things you wanted to do?
I think it was hard within the company. It was hard outside the company. I remember even investors telling me that, don't forget, we're Americans. We like our soda and chips. Don't try to change us. And when I asked them if they changed their habits, they said, oh yeah, we've changed our habits, but we don't want you to change what you're doing. So we had to fight battles across multiple fronts. Change does not happen quickly in our industries because we have to change consumer taste, we have to change the product portfolio, we have to change the business system. So it's still happening. It's a work in process.
Now, if you go to somebody's house for dinner and they say, would you like Coke, what do you say? Does that ever happen, or you leave the dinner, or you?
Yeah, sure. I say it was nice knowing you.
Okay.
And I leave.
So, Bill, I'd like to ask you.
I do leave, yeah. Without a doubt. Actually, my secretary sends them a list ahead of time in case there's a mistake.
Bill, I'd like to ask you a question. I have asked you before, but people are interested in this answer. All of us who have used personal computers are used to turning them on, and we have to have 3 fingers to do so. Control, Alt, Delete. And it's a little awkward sometimes to do that. You are the person who came up with the idea of doing it that way. Why did you do that?
Yeah, the IBM PC hardware keyboard only had one way that it could get a guaranteed interrupt generated. So, clearly the people involved, they should have put another key on in order to make that work. A lot of machines nowadays do have that as a, more obvious function.
But no regrets about doing it that way? It worked out okay?
Well, I'm not sure you can go back and change small things in your life without putting the other things at risk. Sure, if I can make one small edit, I'd make that a single key operation.
Now, by the way, you dropped out of college. Do you think had you gotten your college degree, your life would have been better off?
Well, at the time, it felt like there was a huge sense of urgency that obviously the microprocessor was revolutionary in writing software for it. A lot of existing companies, including IBM, with infinite resources would go and do that. So if we were to have any hope, the sooner we did it, the quicker we did it, the more hardcore we were about it. And so I didn't want to waste a day. And in my 20s, I worked weekends. I didn't believe in vacation. We had to move at high speed because eventually IBM did come in and do OS2 and compete with us. And lots of companies came along later. Of the companies that were formed in that period, we were really the sole survivor. Oracle did another type of software. They're about our vintage as a software company. But those are the only two companies that really survived out of that era. Us, because we were a broad product company, we did platforms, we were very international. So it would have been hard to hold me back. Once I saw that opportunity, Harvard, which I loved, was a very relaxed thing where you would sort of sit in classes and stay up all night and talk to people. It didn't have that same intensity. So I really, once I saw the opportunity, I was going to leave.
And your parents, what did they say?
They were saying, hey, we were paying your tuition. What does this mean? And I said, well, I'm on leave, which is true. I could have gone back. Harvard's very generous about that. I mean, eventually the course catalog sort of changes on you, and you're a little too old for it. But they weren't sure if it would succeed or not, so they thought maybe I'd head back. But because I was single and just maniacal in those days, it was a perfect thing for me.
And final question. Now you're innovating in a number of areas, but one of them is energy. You've started a fund, and it's to invest in energy innovation. Why have you picked that area?
Well, energy is a case where we have a real danger that even though innovation is fantastic, it proceeds at different paces in different industries. And education, it proceeds very slowly for a variety of structural reasons. Energy, there really is no incentive because a new type of power plant is going to take decades to prove. Your patents will be expired. The regulatory commissions don't want to take the risk of a new type of power plant. We've seen with what's gone on with nuclear, how tough that's been. And so because of climate change, and because Africa actually has less electricity today per person than it had 10 years ago, because the population growth has exceeded the electrical generation capacity increase, we have a huge problem. We need low-cost, clean energy. And so I do think that for those who can spare capital, that's risky capital, that joining in on this is a great thing. Masa was the one who got us over the top on our fund commitment. Thank you again.
Yes. You made a phone call. I had to do that.
And, is it easy to say no to Bill? I guess not, right?
No. I respect Bill so much. I never say no to him.
Okay. All right. So you have that fund and you're now investing it, right?
Yeah. It's about $1 billion, and we spent the last year hiring the team. Now we've got an incredible team, some people that and really excited about what they'll be able to do. And so it's about a 15 to 20 year time period, a little longer than you'd have in, say, biology or digital investment, because just proving out plants at scale is very hard.
Now, Aliko, rightly or wrongly, many people think innovation is based in Silicon Valley or maybe in Seattle area or maybe in Japan or in China, but they don't think of Africa as a place for a lot of innovation. Is that unfair? And do you think there are a lot of African entrepreneurs who in the next 10 years will really change the face of Africa?
Well, I think there are quite a lot of entrepreneurs in Africa that can, which they have invested in the last 10 years. And they're also ready and willing to invest going forward. It is unfair to say that, yes, there's actually nothing is happening in Africa. Because, for example, we have a locally designed biometric data, which was actually created by, for example, a local company. Let me give you a small story. We have about 1 million people. Dangote Foundation wanted to target 1 million women in various local government. Local government are the ones that you call counties here. And we go to every local government, we meet up 1,000 women, and we give them a grant, free grant, to improve on their lives so that they can increase on their capital and see. So at the beginning, we had it done manually, where, once we give them the money, we're even taking a risk doing that with commercial banks, taking the money all the way to be giving them in cash. But later on, a local company designed the biometric data, where now we registered all of them. We use the banking mobile system to pay the money. And we also register all of them. All of them, they are now on our data. Out of the 1 million, because it was going very slow, lack of data and all this, and so now we have reached 300,000, and we believe in the next 2 years we'll be able to complete the remaining 700,000. But with that, we're able to now go back to these same people and find out, okay, fine, this money that we gave them, has it really changed their lives? Right. Which it did.
Okay.
And the same thing that, on our joint partnership with Bill in terms of fighting polio, okay? Because what happened was that before, we just had the mapping done manually by hand, and we normally send, vaccinators to go out there. They will now say, yes, we have vaccinated 7 million children. But then we keep on seeing the cases of polio going up until when we use the GIS mapping, okay? And now we give these vaccinators a mobile, right, to take with them with a chip, which means it will show us where they've been to. And when they come back, we know whether they have actually been there to vaccinate this same, because they have trackers on there.
I see. So, Bill, let me ask you about, you've been involved in trying to beat back malaria. What's the argument against killing all mosquitoes? Why don't we just eliminate all mosquitoes, which I think we have the capability of doing, and that would eliminate malaria. What's the argument against that?
Malaria is only killed by a type of mosquito called an anopheline, which is like 1 out of 1,000 mosquitoes. And the main thing is that it's precedent setting. If you think, okay, humans can go and get this species, what's your criteria for anything that might be a nuisance, and yet you might make a mistake? It might be key to an ecosystem. If you got rid of all mosquitoes, there actually are some bats that feed on those mosquitoes, and you'd have to look at those ecosystem effects. The anophelines are such a small percentage of mosquitoes, and there's no other species that's dependent on that this new genetic approach called gene drive, that it's still in the labs, it's not totally proven, but it has a good chance of being able to knock down anopheline populations by about 99% over a 5-year period. That probably, for the toughest part of Africa, that includes Nigeria, sort of the center, where malaria is really a huge problem, we probably need that tool. And so, how are we going to get consensus on that is tricky because, some people worry. I suppose there must be somebody who worries about mosquitoes. Most people worry about the precedent of how such decisions are made.
So, Indra, it's often thought that we hear about great technology leaders or great innovators. They often are men. Is that because it's of a sexist thing where men don't tend to let women get the opportunity, or is it some other reason, and do you think it's going to change anytime soon?
I am not an expert on women in technology, but I will say something interesting. I was at an MIT event on Sunday, and the president of MIT was telling me that 50% of the engineering graduates from MIT are women. But if you go to most companies, 50% of the engineering staff are not women. And if you read some of the stories in the press about what happens in the Silicon Valley area, 50% of the people who are getting the funding or in the valley are not women. So obviously there's something that's causing that leakage between MIT, which is a premier institution, and in practice. Okay. So I think if we want to utilize all these resources that we are spending money on and graduating, we have to do something different.
Final question, Masa. Is artificial intelligence a good thing for humans or not a good thing? And are your robots going to take over humanity?
I think that the misuse of artificial intelligence could be horrible, but there are thousands of good reasons to utilize artificial intelligence for good for humanity. It solved the unsolvable diseases. It solved the unsolvable disaster and many other things. So I think it's really good.
Okay? Well, we're out of time that was allotted to us. I want to thank you all very much for an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mike,